I still remember the way his voice cut through the air that day. Sharp, cold, laced with entitlement. You don't belong here. The words froze me in place. I had been standing at the gate of a sprawling mansion, sweat dripping down my back, a package in hand. The sun was beating hard, my uniform shirt sticking to my skin, and all I wanted to do was complete the delivery, sign off, and move on to the next stop. But the man standing in front of me had other plans. He wasn't just some random homeowner. No, he carried himself like he owned more than just this mansion. He was tall, mid-50s, silver hair slicked back, a tailored suit that screamed money and arrogance. His blue eyes bored into me like I was a stain on his perfect view. "What are you doing here?" he asked, though he didn't give me the chance to answer. His gaze flicked to the package in my hand. "Delivery? For who?" His lip curled into a sneer. "You people don't belong in this neighborhood." My fist clenched, but I swallowed my pride. This wasn't the first time someone had looked at me like I was dirt under their shoe. But there was something different about this moment. Something in his tone that wasn't just casual racism. It was territorial, as if I had trespassed in a place where he thought black men didn't deserve to breathe. I cleared my throat, keeping my voice steady. "Sir, I'm just doing my job. I've got a package for this address. If you could just..." "No!" he snapped, stepping closer, his cologne almost choking me. "You're lying. Nobody like you should even be standing at this gate. You don't belong here." My pulse quickened. Behind him, the gates opened slowly, revealing the sprawling estate beyond. Fountains, trim hedges, a driveway long enough to fit 10 cars. I had been inside houses like this before, on deliveries, of course. Never as a guest. Never as someone welcome. But here's what he didn't know. I did belong there, more than he could ever imagine. Because tucked inside my pocket, next to my phone and delivery scanner, were a set of shiny silver keys. Keys that could unlock every single door in that mansion. Keys that had been given to me not as a delivery driver, not as an outsider, but as someone far closer to this house than the man glaring at me could ever guess. I kept my calm, lowering the package slowly. "Look, sir," I said evenly, "I'm just here to do my job. You can sign for it, or I can leave at the door." But he wasn't interested in logic. He wanted a scene. He wanted me humiliated. "You're a thief," he spat. "I know your kind. Looking for trouble. I ought to call the police right now." That word, police, sent a chill down my spine. I had heard it used like a weapon before, not as a call for help. But as a threat, a leash meant to remind me of my place. I stared at him for a long second, weighing my options. Do I walk away and let him win? Do I fight back and risk everything? Or do I remind him, without saying a single word, that I was not the man he thought I was? So I reached into my pocket. His eyes narrowed, suspicion flashing across his face. He stepped back slightly, ready to shout, ready to accuse. But then his expression shifted, confusion, disbelief, and finally, the faintest trace of fear. Because dangling from my fingers were the keys. Shiny, familiar, undeniable. I held them up to the light, letting them glint like silver fire. And in that moment, the silence between us spoke louder than anything I could have said. The man's jaw tightened. His arrogance faltered. He looked at the keys, then at me, and for the first time since I had arrived, he didn't have a single word to say. But let me take you back to how I got those keys, to why I, a black delivery driver who was told I didn't belong, actually belonged more than he could ever imagine. It all started months earlier with another delivery. For more chilling stories, kindly subscribe to this channel, thanks. The sun dipped lower, casting long golden streaks across the pristine neighborhood lawns. Marcus could still feel their eyes burning into his back as he carried the package up the driveway. Every step felt heavy. He had done hundreds of deliveries before, but never one where his very presence was treated as a crime. He placed the box gently at the doorstep, took a photo for proof, and turned back toward his van. But by then, the crowd had grown larger. 3 more neighbors had stepped outside, arms crossed, glaring. One woman muttered loudly enough for Marcus to hear, "They're letting anyone in these days." His throat tightened, but Marcus kept walking. Then came the sharp voice again, The same man who had first confronted him. "Hey, I told you this isn't your kind of place. You need to leave before I call the cops." Marcus stopped, his chest heaving. He turned slowly, eyes locking with the man. For the first time that day, he let his voice cut through the air like a blade. "I belong wherever I'm sent to do my job. I'm here because I've worked for everything I have. What about you?" The silence that followed was suffocating. But before the man could reply, the sound of police sirens sliced through the tension. 2 squad cars rolled up, lights flashing. Marcus's stomach dropped, his hands instinctively clenched into fists at his sides. Though he knew he couldn't afford even a wrong move, 2 officers stepped out. One placed his hand on his holster. The other approached with that cautious, measured walk Marcus had seen too many times before. "Sir, we got a call about a suspicious individual. Can I see some ID?" The neighbors smirked, whispering among themselves. Some even pulled out their phones to record. Eager to see him humiliated, Marcus reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and handed the officer his license. His hands shook, but not from fear. No, it was rage boiling under his skin. The officer glanced at it, then back at Marcus. "And what are you doing in this neighborhood?" Marcus didn't answer with words. Instead, he walked back to his van, reached into the glove compartment, and pulled out a small, gleaming key ring. He held it up high for everyone to see. The neighbors leaned forward, squinting. Then Marcus said it, his voice steady, but filled with the weight of every insult, every stare, every time someone told him he didn't belong. "These are my keys." He clicked the fob, and in that moment, the gates at the end of the cul-de-sac slowly swung open. Gasps rippled through the crowd, because Marcus didn't just work in this neighborhood. He lived here. For more chilling stories, kindly subscribe to this channel, thanks. The gates swung wide, the motor humming in the heavy silence. Every neighbor's jaw seemed to drop in unison. Marcus stood tall, his keys glinting under the setting sun. His breathing steadied, no longer quick or shallow, just calm, steady, and firm. The man who had first accused him stuttered, his arrogance cracking. Wait a second. You're telling me you..." "Yes," Marcus cut in, his voice sharp, commanding. "This isn't just a neighborhood I deliver to. This is where I live." He took a step closer, eyes locked on the officer who still had his hand near his holster. "And this isn't the first time I've had to prove that I belong in a space I already paid my way into." The officer hesitated, then cleared his throat, lowering his hand. "Sir, we didn't realize." But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned his gaze to the neighbors, his voice rising now, deep with conviction. "You saw me carrying a box, and instead of seeing a man doing his job, you saw a threat. Instead of asking me a question, you called the cops. You decided that my skin color meant I couldn't possibly own the same kind of home you live in." The crowd shifted uneasily. No one dared meet his eyes. Then Marcus walked slowly toward his house. His house. He pointed at the wide porch, the tall windows, the carefully trimmed hedges. "Do you see this? Every brick, every inch of it. I worked for it. I delivered packages, rain or shine. I took double shifts. I went years without vacations. I built this life. And yet, the moment you see me in it, you think I don't belong." His words hit harder than any siren, louder than any accusation. Even the officers stood silently, their heads low. And then, something unexpected happened. From the edge of the crowd, a voice spoke, a softer voice. An older woman, clutching her cane, stepped forward. She was one of the longest residents of the neighborhood. "I remember when they broke ground on that lot," she said. Her tone wasn't hostile. It carried a strange note of shame. "I remember seeing you drive past every day, delivering packages, and I didn't know it was you who bought it." Marcus nodded, his voice steady. "Yes, it was me, and I'm not going anywhere." The man who had started it all muttered under his breath, "This neighborhood is changing too fast." Marcus turned back to him, fire in his eyes. "No, the truth is it's been too slow. And maybe tonight, you all learned something about the difference between who belongs and who doesn't." The crowd was silent. Even the air felt heavier. Marcus finally turned back toward his van, keys in hand. But this time, he didn't leave. He unlocked the door to his home, walked up the porch steps, and disappeared inside. The officers quietly left. The neighbors scattered. And for the first time in years, that cul-de-sac didn't feel so safe with their prejudice anymore. Because now they knew Marcus wasn't just passing through. He was here to stay. Inside his home, Marcus closed the door behind him. The echo of silence filled the space. Silence, but not peace. He leaned against the doorframe, his chest rising and falling. His hand still clutched the keys, knuckles pale from the grip. He had offended himself tonight. But the memory burned deeper than the confrontation, because this wasn't just about tonight. It was about every night before. Marcus grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of town. The walls were thin, the carpet worn, and the ceiling leaked whenever it rained too hard. His mother worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices by day, frying chicken at a diner by night. She would come home smelling of bleach and grease, her hands cracked from scrubbing floors, but she always found a way to smile at Marcus and his younger sister. "Baby," she would say, placing her callous hand on his cheek. "They might try to tell you what you can't do, but you hear me? You keep proving what you can do." Marcus carried those words like armor. When he was 17, his best friend Jamal dropped out of high school. "Man, what's the point?" Jamal had said one night, sitting on the hood of an old Chevy, "They're not hiring us anyway." But Marcus wasn't Jamal. He refused to let the world shut the door on him before he even knocked. So he worked, and he worked hard. By 21, he was hauling packages at the distribution center, long before sunrise. Forklifts beeped around him. Sweat clung to his back, and the air smelled of diesel. He'd clock out sore, sleep 4 hours, then clock in again for another shift. His friends partied on weekends. Marcus delivered boxes. His co-workers joked about vacations. Marcus picked up overtime. And still, he was overlooked. He remembered one winter, when a promotion opened up. He'd been the top employee for months. But when the manager announced a new supervisor, it wasn't him. It was a younger white man who'd been there less than a year. Marcus had pulled the manager aside. "Sir, I've done the numbers. My performance is higher. My record is cleaner. Why wasn't I considered?" The manager gave him that look, the one Marcus had come to know too well, the one that said, "You should be grateful we even let you in the door. We just thought he was a better fit," the manager had muttered. Marcus swallowed his pride that night, but he never forgot. Years stacked like bricks, long hours, missed birthdays, dinners eaten cold in the van. Yet every paycheck Marcus saved. He didn't buy new shoes when the old ones wore thin. He didn't upgrade his phone when screens cracked. Instead, he stacked every dollar toward a dream. A house. Not just any house. A house in a neighborhood where his children could play without fear. A house where his mother could finally rest without worrying about leaks or landlords. A house where his last name would be on the deed, where nobody could tell him to get out. But the road wasn't smooth. Banks turned him down, not once, not twice, but 3 times. "Mr. Johnson," they'd say politely, "your profile isn't quite strong enough." Marcus knew what that meant. He had the income. He had the discipline. But what he didn't have was the look, the one they trusted. So he doubled down. He worked delivery routes until his hands ached from gripping the wheel. He drove in storms, in heat waves, in the dead of night. Customers barely noticed him when he dropped packages on their porches, but Marcus noticed everything. Every house, every driveway, every neighborhood he drove through. And every time, he whispered to himself, "One day, this will be mine." That day finally came. The approval letter arrived on a Wednesday morning. He unfolded the paper in his van, his hands trembling. The words blurred through his tears, but he caught the line he'd been praying for, "Application approved." He sat in that driver's seat and wept. Years of rejection, years of sweat, years of humiliation, all leading to that single word, approved. And now here he was, standing in that house, holding those keys. But even in victory, the weight of the struggle pressed on him. Because tonight had proved something cruel. Owning the house wasn't enough. Working hard wasn't enough. proving himself again and again still wasn't enough for some people. The neighbors hadn't seen Marcus Johnson, homeowner. They had only seen Marcus Johnson, black man with a package. He pressed his forehead against the door and whispered to himself, "I belong here. Whether they like it or not, I belong." And deep down, he knew his fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. The crowd around the gated community grew silent. Phones were out. Neighbors whispered. Even the man who had called security earlier now stood frozen, his face pale. And there I was, holding those keys, not just to the car, not just to the gate, but to the truth. Because these weren't any ordinary keys. They were the master keys to the entire complex. The kind only one person could hold. The man in the suit, the one who had insulted me, told me I didn't belong, stared in shock. "Wait, how did you?" he stammered, his arrogance slipping into fear. I stepped closer. My voice didn't need to be loud. The silence carried it for me. "I don't just make deliveries here," I said. "I manage this place. Every lock, every system, every door you think keeps people like me out." A ripple went through the crowd. Security guards lowered their radios. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably. The man's own wife grabbed his arm, whispering something that made him look down at his shoes. And then the real weight of the moment hit, because this wasn't just about keys. It was about value, respect, dignity. He wanted me to feel small, invisible, unworthy of standing on that manicured street. But those keys proved something greater, that I wasn't just allowed here. I was trusted here, needed here. I looked at the man one last time and said, "You told me I didn't belong. But the truth is, maybe it's you who doesn't." The crowd gasped. Someone clapped. Then another, and another, until applause filled the air. The man's face burned red. He turned, dragging his wife back inside, the heavy gate closing behind him with a clang. But the sound wasn't victory. It was justice, because in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about me. It was about every black man, every worker, every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. And with those keys in my hand, I wasn't just opening doors. I was tearing down walls. The sun had begun its descent, draping long shadows across the manicured lawns of Oakwood Heights. For Marcus, the neighborhood had always felt like foreign territory. Gated communities with brick-pillared entrances, security cameras blinking like unwelcoming eyes, and residents who looked through him rather than at him. But today was different. Today, he wasn't just delivering packages. Today, he carried something heavier than cardboard boxes or plastic envelopes. He carried the weight of every time someone told him, "You don't belong here." Marcus parked his delivery truck at the cul-de-sac's end, right beneath a row of tall oak trees swaying in the evening breeze. His hands trembled slightly as he reached into his pocket. The cool metal of the keys pressed against his palm. Proof, undeniable proof, that Oakwood Heights wasn't just theirs. It was his, too. The same homeowner from earlier, the man in the red polo who called out, "What are you doing here?" stood across the street with his arms folded. His narrowed eyes trailed Marcus, dripping suspicion. A couple of other neighbors had joined him, whispering behind manicured hedges, glancing at Marcus as if he were an intruder rather than a man doing his job. But Marcus didn't hide. He walked with calm purpose toward a 2-story brick home at the corner lot, the kind of house most delivery drivers only dreamed of stepping inside. He stopped at the walkway, looked around once more at the gathering stairs, and then slid the key into the front door lock. Click. The sound was louder than thunder in the silence. The door swung open. Gasps rippled across the street. A white-haired woman clutched her pearls. The man in the red polo muttered something under his breath. Too low to hear. Marcus stepped inside. For a moment, he lingered in the doorway, his figure framed by the golden evening light spilling across the polished hardwood floors. He wasn't trespassing. He wasn't breaking in. He was home. Behind him, the whispers grew louder. "Wait, what's going on? Does he live there? There's no way." Marcus turned back, eyes burning but voice steady. "You told me I don't belong here. But this..." He raised the keys for them all to see, their metallic shine catching the sunset. This says otherwise. The neighbors froze. For the first time, the power of Oakwood Heights shifted. It wasn't theirs alone anymore. It was his, too. And Marcus? He didn't just unlock a house that evening. He unlocked the beginning of something bigger. Respect, dignity, and a story no one in that cul-de-sac would ever forget. For more chilling stories, kindly subscribe to this channel, thanks. The silence in Oakwood Heights was deafening. The kind of silence that holds more weight than words. Neighbors stood frozen on their manicured lawns, their mouths open, their pride cracked like fragile glass. Marcus closed the door gently behind him, leaving them to choke on their own whispers. Inside, the house was quiet but not empty. Every corner of it carried the scent of his journey, the dream that had brought him here. On the mantel stood framed photographs. Marcus in his delivery uniform, smiling with his daughter on Take Your Child to Work Day. Marcus at his mother's side, holding her hand in the hospital, promising her that one day he'd buy a house she could be proud of. And now here it was. But peace wouldn't last long. A knock rattled the door. Firm, impatient, almost angry. Marcus took a breath, squared his shoulders, and opened it. Standing there was a man in the red polo, face flushed with something that wasn't just curiosity. It was disbelief. It was fear disguised as authority. You can't just walk in there like that, the man stammered. His voice was tight, his eyes darting toward the growing crowd behind him. This is a quiet neighborhood. We don't. Don't what? Marcus cut in, his voice calm but sharp. Don't expect people like me to live here? The man hesitated. His throat worked, but no words came. Then, from the back of the crowd, another voice rose, shaky but strong. Leave him alone. It was Mrs. Patterson, the oldest resident in Oakwood Heights. She was small, fragile-looking, but her presence commanded attention. She leaned on her cane, her silver hair catching the fading light. I've lived here 40 years, she said, and I know who belongs here. He does. He earned it. The man in the red polo clenched his jaw, but the crowd had shifted. Some of them were still uneasy, but others began to nod, their whispers softening. Marcus looked at Mrs. Patterson and gave a grateful nod. For once, he didn't feel like a stranger. He felt seen. But just as the air began to ease, headlights cut through the street. A police cruiser rolled slowly into the cul-de-sac, its siren silent, but its presence heavy. The neighbors tensed. Some stepped back, others folded their arms. The man in the red polo smirked like he had just won. Marcus? He didn't move. He stood tall on the porch of his own home, the keys still in his hand, waiting for the next test. The police cruiser slowed to a stop at the edge of the cul-de-sac, its headlights washing over the crowd like a spotlight. The hum of the engine filled the silence. Doors creaked open, and two officers stepped out. Their hands rested on their belts, not yet on their weapons, but close enough to send a message. The man in the red polo stepped forward quickly, pointing toward Marcus like a child tattling in the schoolyard. That's him, he said. He doesn't belong here. He broke into that house. The word spread to the crowd like gasoline on fire. A few neighbors gasped. Others shook their heads. And the man's smirk grew. Marcus stayed still, calm. His heart beat hard, but his face gave nothing away. He raised the keys slowly, letting the metal catch the glow of the headlights. This is my house, Marcus said, his voice steady. I didn't break into anything. I just came home. One of the officers, a younger one, face tight with unease, glanced at the keys, then back at Marcus. The older officer narrowed his eyes, scanning Marcus up and down, as if the truth could be found in his skin. Sir, the older officer said, we're going to need you to prove that. Do you have ID? Deed papers? Something that shows this is really yours. The crowd leaned in, phones lifted, recording every word. Marcus knew what this moment meant, not just for him, but for every black man who ever had to defend his existence in a place people swore he didn't belong. He reached into his pocket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out his wallet. Inside was his driver's license, his name, his address, Oakwood Heights. He held it out. Check it yourself. The younger officer took it. His eyes flickered across the details. For a moment, his expression shifted. Something like realization, maybe even shame. He looked to his partner. "It matches," he said quietly. But the older officer didn't back down so easily. His jaw tightened. He glanced at the man in the red polo, then at the neighbors. The weight of their stares pressed on him. "Still," the officer said, "you don't just walk into a place like this and expect people not to ask questions." Marcus finally let the fire in his chest show in his voice. "People don't ask questions when someone else does it. They only ask when it's me. And you know it." The crowd shifted again. Mrs. Patterson's cane tapped against the pavement. Her voice cut sharp through the night. "He belongs here. The only person who doesn't is the one stirring up trouble." All eyes snapped back to the man in the red polo. His smirk faltered, his hands clenched into fists. And for the first time, he looked like the outsider. But the night wasn't finished testing Marcus. Because just as the tension thickened, a second cruiser pulled up, this time with siren flashing. The real storm was only beginning. For more chilling stories, kindly subscribe to this channel, thanks. The crowd had grown so large now that the entire cul-de-sac was filled. Neighbors, reporters, strangers holding their phones high, their voices weaving together into a single chant. "Let him in! Let him in!" The second police cruiser had pulled up, sirens still echoing off the houses. But instead of charging in, the officers froze. They weren't expecting this. They weren't expecting witnesses. Inside the mansion gates, Richard's voice cracked like thunder. "You people don't belong here. This is my world." But Marcus didn't flinch anymore. He wasn't the same delivery driver who was first told to leave. He stood tall, holding up the keys that glimmered under the streetlight. "This isn't your world, Richard. This is our world. You don't get to decide who belongs anymore." The crowd roared. And then, like destiny itself, the mansion doors swung open. Out stepped Richard's wife and daughter. The daughter's eyes were red, swollen from crying. She looked at Marcus, then at her father. "Dad's over. Everybody can see what you've done." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the officers hesitated. The truth was no longer hidden behind money or gates. The truth was standing right here, in the open, alive in Marcus's hands. Richard staggered back, suddenly looking small in the shadow of his own empire. The arrogance that once fueled him was gone. His voice was a whisper now. "They'll never believe you." But before he could finish, hundreds of phones lit up, cameras recording every second. Marcus turned toward the crowd, raising the keys high like a symbol. "They already do." The chant returned, louder, unstoppable. "Let him in! Let him in!" The police didn't move. They couldn't. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. This was about every black man, woman, and child who had ever been told they didn't belong. Richard collapsed into his chair, broken, not by Marcus's strength, but by the weight of his own lies. Marcus took one step forward, his voice calm but powerful. "You tried to keep me out, Richard. But tonight, the world saw the truth, and you can't lock out the truth." The crowd erupted one final time. Marcus turned to leave, not defeated, but victorious. Because he knew this was only the beginning. For more chilling stories, kindly subscribe to this channel, thanks.